right, ready? Ready to go? The 18th annual Thoroughbred Book Award. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. Shane Ryan, unfortunately, had last minute hang-ups up in Ireland. He couldn't make it today. So he expresses deepest regrets he couldn't be here, and thank you all for coming out to the award. My name's Mark Simon, and I was editor of Thoroughbred Times when we started this award with Dr. Ryan in 2006. It's been a while. 18 years. 2006. First one was Black Meister by Georgetown, first winner. And unfortunately, Dr. Ryan died after 2 years of the award. He renamed, went from the Thoroughbred Times, Castleton Lyons Book Award to the Dr. Tony Ryan Book Award to honor Dr. Ryan. And Shane has, the last every year since, been a great trooper and in honor of his father. And it's been a very tough, it's been a great award. And I'm not sure everybody appreciates how hard it is to win this thing, but it is tough. I got to marry my wife, and doing the press releases and everything for this thing since day one. And so she got a call from one of the writers from this year. She was a finalist in past year. This year she wrote a really great historical book, and she was all distraught. She called Mary. She wouldn't make the semifinalists. Top six, and so she was questioning everything about about writing and everything. But writing is a tough business, and all the writers, they put their heart and soul into these books. It takes sometimes two, 3, 4 years. 2 or 3, 4 years to get this thing from the time you think about it and do all your research, the time it's actually published. And so that's why a award like this, which really awards and the writers for a very large award, it's great because I was listening to NPR not too long ago, and they were talking about a writer he wrote a book about writing books, and he was saying there's 2 million books a year which are published, and of those 2 million books, 2 million authors, only 10,000 get advances.
Whoa.
That's people getting advances, so it's just a tough business to be in. So we have an award for Dr. Ryan's book award for $10,000 to the winner and a trophy, as well as $1,000 to each of the other finalists. Is very significant and appreciated by the writers who put so much time and effort into this, and it's been a great thing because there are other award in racing like Eclipse Awards, etc., that honor book publishing. So this has been great. Before we get on to the main part of the award ceremony here, I want to thank all the staff at Castleton Lyons for helping pull this thing together, particularly Carrie Cahill. Who does a lot of administrative work and juggles a lot of things and stays in contact with all the writers and the publishers, and it's a tremendous amount of work that she does. We all appreciate that. Also thank all the judges. Kay Coy has been the chief judge for 14 years, maybe?
17 of the 18.
A long time, and so and those two are Kate and Radar. She's here. You'll see her a little bit later. And Diane's wife, who couldn't make it, unfortunately, and so she was also a judge this year. They were Boston, she was a writer. She was a award winner for the Boston Globe. Right, she did a great job. She loves books, and so she was happy to participate and read all these books. So reading all these books is no neat feat, so it's tough. What we'll have here is Kay will come up here and she'll talk about the books, and then eventually we'll get all the authors up here to talk about their book as well. Thank you. Kay.
There's that famous lead in a book that we all joke about, the best of times and worst of times. This was like the best of years and worst of years to be a judge for the Dr. Tony Ryan Book Award. We had 22 entries, and they were all really good. And we had more than one former winner of the award. We had several former finalists of the award. We had just an incredible group of authors. Some of the best books were by first-time authors. I mean, it was just all over the map. And I noticed, I looked at our list of addresses for everyone. 3 were from Canada, 2 were from the United Kingdom. We had 5 from Lexington, although some others were kind of grandfathered Lexington folks or bluegrass because their subject matter was bluegrass and they spend a lot of time here. We had a couple from Florida, but a lot of authors from Washington State or New Mexico and Alabama, and just it was a real great mix of all of racing writers or people covering racing and thoroughbred industry all across the world pretty much. But for the judging process, we get our deadline for entry is December the 31st. So should you know someone who likes to write about horse racing and maybe they're new to this, let them know. They have till December 31st to get their 2024 book into the next competition. And then we furiously read for the next few months. We used to try to get this, we used to do this award in April. So it used to be really hard to read say 15, 16, 17 books in January, February, March, and then the judges get together and we discuss the semifinalists, we come up with that group, and then we winnow it down to the 3 finalists. And I've always, if you've heard me speak here before, I always talk about sometimes it's easy to figure out the top 5 books, but you get to that 6th book, and there's the 6th book, and the 7th book, and the 8th book, and the 9th book are all really good. And everyone, you know, at the judges as a group, we talk about what we didn't like about the book. We kind of have a general guideline of we want the book to be very much about thoroughbred racing. So some of the books may only slightly touch on racing or breeding or some aspect. We want the book to be something they would recommend to their friends, that for everyone would enjoy. It can be controversial. It can be a little dark. That's fine, you know, as long as it's a very well written book. And we certainly had a group this year that encompassed all of those. Some of the semifinalists even within the discussion of those books, they had published other books, and we sometimes liked the book they submitted this year better than the book that rose higher up in the competition, but it was just because the quality of books that we have this year. So I'm looking at 2024 to see what's published out there, and I see a bunch of good books, and they're starting to come in, and I'm kind of happy with 2 or 3, you know, some real good ones, and some that were off my radar that I've just learned about recently. So I'm not above contacting authors if I think they may not be aware of the award. So I'm going to now introduce Katherine Breedar, who's been one of our judges for many years here. Katherine is, number one, a voracious reader. I mean, she has to spend a lot of time at airports, so she's always got something reading. Kate and I are even in just for Fun book club in Louisville, Kentucky, that, you know, we just read for fun. But she's also just amazingly qualified because she and her family have been in the business for her whole life. She's got to be a rare person who has not one but 2 grandfathers who are in horse racing halls of fame. So one is a jockey in the Thoroughbred Racing Hall of Fame. One was a standardbred breeder or trainer who's in the Standardbred Hall of Fame. And she was a licensed trainer as a teenager, were you? As a teenager in Illinois, you know, in that competitive Chicago area that she was in. And as you all, probably many of you know her as one of the broadcasters and handicappers for what was TVG and now FanDuel. And sometimes does some broadcasting here in Louisville, I mean not here in Louisville, but in Louisville for the radio station during the Crown and Breeders' Cup and other races. But come on up, and Kate will introduce, come on up, Kate. She will introduce each author, and each author will talk a little bit about their book.
Kay did a beautiful job of kind of summarizing the feelings here, and I mentioned to somebody else that this evening, while I look forward to it every year, is so special to be in this place and to be surrounded by people who are interested in books and racing and a very different group of people than we necessarily see on a regular basis at the races, so it's a real treat. At the same time, I'm always feeling a little anxious because there are 3 finalists, all of whom are very deserving, and only 1 winner at the end of the night. And I feel personally that anybody who actually takes on the task of writing a book and is brave enough to venture into that, to put their heart and soul into something and completes it, is a winner already. But truly, this year especially, there were so many winners in this contest, many of whom aren't even here tonight or mentioned among even the semifinalists, that it's a hard night for the judges because we would love to make every single one a winner, and they truly are. So please give yourselves applause and know how much your efforts are appreciated and remarked on. This night is for all of you who participated in the contest. Rather than introduce each of the writers, I found that I wanted to try to pick a passage from the books. We're going to go in alphabetical order because the goal, and I believe that this was something that Dr. Ryan was very committed to, was to get people to write about racing and to encourage quality literature about this great sport and every aspect of it. And certainly this year fulfilled the mission, but I think the writing speaks for itself with all the authors. So I don't ever talk to the authors to ask them what section, and all I'm trying to do is just give you a little taste, enough to buy the book and dive in and read it if you haven't done so already. So the first one is Isaac Murphy, The Rise and Fall of a Black Jockey, Katherine C. Mooney. And this is toward the beginning of the book. America Murphy Burns, that is Isaac Murphy's mother, would not have known all the pressures that would shape her son's life, but she must have had a more general set of concerns. Women like her had struggled since emancipation to protect their children from exploitative apprenticeships. She sent Isaac to work for Williams and Owings, knowing that boys like him were vulnerable. She would have calculated the risk based on her own experience with Owings and what she heard from the Jordans. She would have weighed the presence of Eli Jordan, an older man, himself a father, who would care for her son and teach him skills that would give him a professional future. Isaac may not have remembered his father at all, and we do not know what he thought of Simon Williams. We do know that for the rest of his life, he would call Jordan the old man. Eli Jordan was obviously proud of him. Isaac was always in his place, and I could put my hand on him any time, day or night. He was always one of the first up in the morning, ready to do anything he was told to do or to help others. He was ever in a good humor and liked to play, but he never neglected his work. He never got the big head. Jordan introduced him to a trade that had a long history. Black men had been working thoroughbreds in Lexington since before the first recorded race meet there in 1827. We don't know what he taught Isaac or if there was anything left to teach him about the dangers of navigating debates over freedom and equality. We don't know if he spoke about what it had been like to be enslaved and what the boy heard about those years from his family. But we know Jordan gave him the gift he could, the gift of an occupation that generations of men like him had followed. He seems to have hoped it would be the basis of the conservative respectability that he wanted for Isaac, the boy who was always where he should be. In racetrack barns all over the South, the boy would be surrounded by skilled black men. On the freedom of those centuries of expertise and the hopes of his mother and those like her, he would make his future in a sport that was in the midst of a national revival. Katherine, come on up. I got to meet all the authors for the first time today, so they can introduce themselves and a little bit about the book.
Thank you so much. It's kind of strange to hear it read. Thank you to all for coming tonight. It's a thrill to be here. It's a thrill to be nominated for an award that I have been fascinated by since I first heard about it. And it's really good to be able to thank all the people in this room who have supported me through 2 books. And thank you to all from this stage. But it's also an honor to talk about Isaac Murphy. And the book really came about because Yale University Press was starting a new African American biography series, and I think, you know, it was a room full of people, and they said, well, we ought to have an athlete. And then they were trying to come up with somebody kind of, oh, you know, who's kind of different. And then somebody came up with Isaac Murphy, and they said, well, yeah, you can write about that. Yeah, I can write about that. And I sort of knew his story. I mean, I'd written a chapter on him before, but going through the records and going through every newspaper account of him I could find, I think did two things. It made me love racing even more, which was great. It was a blessing because it reminded me of the incredibly rich history this sport has in this country and how deeply American history is also racing history. And it really, I think in some ways the book is a love letter to Lexington, and it's a love letter to Isaac Murphy's Lexington, because for him it was a town where a black man who had been born in slavery could become one of the most famous men in America. And I don't think he ever thought of himself as anything but a Lexingtonian. That was, you know, who he was. He was a child of the East End. And so writing this book in some ways was a way to celebrate that whole neighborhood, to celebrate him, to celebrate that community, and also I think to do what I sometimes worry about I'm not doing, which is to celebrate the generations who came after him, and to remember all the people who are at the end of the book who stayed in the industry and who are upholding his legacy even today. So if you're interested in Isaac Murphy, I hope you're also interested in all those other generations who are keeping his name alive.
Much like Catherine's book, the Turcottes, The Remarkable Story of a Horse Racing Dynasty, was noteworthy to me personally because of some experience, some firsthand experience and some secondhand and thirdhand experience, but with the people involved. So one of the wonderful things about this competition is the opportunity to take subjects that you think you know a lot about and find out that you didn't know as much as you thought you did, and you learned something new in the process. And that's certainly the story with the Turcottes, The Remarkable Story of a Horse Racing Dynasty by Curtis Stock. The story of Ron Turcotte and his entire family. Since it's not a spoiler, I think we know what happened in the Triple Crown with Ron Turcotte. I'm going to dive into that moment. This is chapter 12. Half of New Brunswick and all of Grand Falls seemed to shut down the afternoon of May 1st, 1965. Everywhere, people who don't know the difference between an exactor and a tractor gather around radio and television sets like the RCA Victor TV that Ron recently bought for his family. It is Kentucky Derby Day, the Run for the Roses, Kentucky Bluegrass, Sugary Mint Juleps, and the annual pilgrimage to the twin spires of Churchill Downs. Look, there he is. There's Ronnie, Roger squeals, leaving a smudge on the TV screen as he points a finger over top the image of his brother, who's riding in his first derby atop Tom Rolfe. Stiff-shouldered, arms folded across his chest, Ron is listening to two men fidgeting in the paddock. Move back and maybe we'll all see, Rudy yells at Roger. Nobody can see a damn thing. Screwing his 9-year-old face into a mocking grimace, Roger slides backward a couple of inches along the brown paisley carpet. Father, Rudy bellows, get out of the way. Roger sticks out his tongue. Quiet down, both of you. Alfred charges, his deep voice rumbling from the worn-thin ruby folds of his favorite chair. A rug with frayed tassels hangs on the wall over his left shoulder. The rug is a picture of a gnarly horned elk. The elk, too, seems to be watching the Derby. The camera shifts to an aerial shot of Churchill Downs, the infield thick with pressed bodies, many of the women wearing both elegant and outlandish oversized wild hats and fascinators. The view, a faceless voice says, is courtesy of the Goodyear blimp. What's a blimp, asks Raymond, who just turned 12. Mon Dieu, Rose says, yet to comprehend all the excitement. It is all so unfathomable. Just 5 years ago, Ron had watched this very race and didn't know what he was looking at. He didn't know where he was headed. One day ends, the next one begins. Now there he was on the screen with millions of people like Rose watching him, watching her son. Involuntarily, she clucks her lips. Yesterday, the Grand Falls Cataract ran a long story about Ron's Derby debut under a Good Luck Ron headline that smiled broadly across the front page. Only a couple other stories managed to make page 1. A headline of Grand Falls Girl Wins Bake Off, and another that followed underneath the heading, CTC score to hold official opening. Inside, under the headline, Derby to be televised, another page carried 3 more stories about the race. There was also a picture of Canadian actor Lorne Greene, star of Bonanza, one arm draped over Ron's shoulder. Roger, a fan of the Western, wants to know where Hoss and Little Joe were. In Toronto, the Toronto Star Weekly ran 4 open pages on Ron in a special section titled Ron Turcotte, $1,000 a minute jockey. Sipping black coffee, a reporter from the St. John Telegraph-Journal is with the Turcottes, watching from behind. Every once in a while, she jots something onto a pad of yellow paper. Do you think she got our card? Gaetan asks of an 8-foot telegram signed by 320 people from Drummond. I'm sure he did, dear, says Rose. Look, there he is again, Roger yips, leaving another smudge on the television screen. He looks so small, says Alfred. The horse is now on the track as the band plays My Old Kentucky Home, which brings many to tears as they smile and chorus along. Weep no more, my lady. He is small, Dad, Raymond answers. Nah, not Ronnie, Alfred answers. Ron's horse, Tom Rolfe, he looks so small. He is small, says Rudy of the horse, who stands just 15'2" hands tall and weighs considerably less than 1,000 pounds. Like Northern Dancer, 2 brick shit houses. Rudy, your language, says Rose, embarrassed looking at the reporter. The reporter, writing again, chuckles. Just a little taste of the Turcottes, the remarkable story of Horse Racing Dynasty. Curtis, stop.
Thank you for that, and thanks for having me here. I actually started writing this book 25 years ago, but I found out quickly that I couldn't write for the Edmonton Journal covering sports, mostly horse racing, and write the book at the same time. So after a period of time, I got sick for a while, and when I got better and COVID hit, I told myself I didn't have any more excuses, so I started writing the book. The story mentioned about Ron, it's an absolutely amazing story just himself about how he became a jockey. He was working in the woods with his family, a family of 14 kids in Drummond, New Brunswick, and he wanted to go get out of the woods. So he went to Toronto to follow his brother Camille, and he was going to be a carpenter, but there was a carpenter's strike on, so he wound up picking worms at golf courses and cemeteries, getting $3 for 1,000 worms. They washed dishes, they couldn't find any work. So Ron and his best friend Reggie Peltier from New Brunswick as well decided they were going to come home. And it was the first Saturday of May of 1960, and Ron came down the stairs to tell his landlord that he was going to leave, and the landlord said, and he asked what the landlord was watching, because he was watching horses on the TV, and it was the Kentucky Derby. And the landlord said to Ron, that's what you should be a jockey. And Ron said, what's a jockey? And the landlord said, the little guys in the white pants. And he said, they need people to work. So he went to Woodbine, and somehow he got through the guards. Trainer picked them up and said, are you going in to work? And they said, yeah. And the guard at the gate said, yeah, everybody got their license? And they all said, yeah. And they dropped them off at the racing secretary's office, and instead of, the racing secretary asking them what the hell they're doing here and how they got in, he let them cross the street to E.P. Taylor's barn, and he got a job. And within 2 years, he was Canada's leading rider. And then his brothers, there was 5 brothers that became jockeys. Noel followed, then Rudy, then Roger, then Yves. And it's a 1,000,000 to 1 trifecta that all these things came together, that they all became top riders. And unfortunately, tragedy happened to all of them. Ron was in an accident in New York and was paralyzed in a wheelchair. Noel and Roger both committed suicide. Rudy died of alcoholism. and Eves was in an accident and was told that he could never ride again. So there was a lot of great things happening to the family, but an equal amount of tragedy. I've always loved horse racing. I've been riding it for 50 years now. My parents took me to the races for the first time in Calgary, and I bet $2 on a Quinella, and I paid $33, and I said, how easy is this? And I was hooked. While I was going to university, I got hired as a summer student at the Calgary Herald, and they needed someone to cover horse racing. I quickly put up my hand, and I worked at the Calgary Herald for 3 years, and then worked at Woodbine for Bruce Walker in publicity, and then I was hired in Edmonton to work at the Journal. So to be here is remarkable, and thank you.
Before I dive into the last book, which is Lexington, The Extraordinary Life and Turbulent Times of America's Legendary Racehorse by Kim Wickens, I just want to, if you hadn't noticed already, the books are all for sale here, and every one of them would make a great Christmas present, holiday gift. I have a copy of the book for judging, and I'm buying each of the books to give to others as well, because they are wonderful. Such interesting stories in their own right, even if you're not a horse racing person, but even more so if you are into horses or racing. The one thing about Lexington that's been very interesting is the few people that I talk to in racing that really know very much about Lexington, which after having read this book as well as the fiction book, Horse, that was written and our contest winner last year, would tell you that this is probably one of the most important horses that you should know about if you're involved in the sport. So, and there are many places you could pick it up, but I'm kind of in the transition stage, right in the middle between the racing career and his stud career, which were equally fascinating and certainly prolific. Lexington's eyes, having served his racing days as best they could, were no longer reliable due to random and more frequent bouts of inflammation. He would soon leave New Orleans, the city that had come to cherish him as its own, for the last time. T.S. Moyes, the artist who had painted Lecomte, knew he might never have the opportunity to memorialize the horse in paint. While Lexington was still at the Metairie, Moyes captured the horse in full racing form. So did Nathaniel Ives of New York's Courier and Ives. 7 days after the race, His Excellency, Governor Hebert, Tenbrook, and several turfmen gathered around Lexington underneath the old twisted oak that shaded his stall. They uncorked champagne bottles and passed glasses around. Lexington's trainer faced them and graciously accepted a silver pitcher on which was engraved, "To J.B. Pryor by his friends, for his admirable and skillful training of the celebrated horse Lexington, 7:19 3/4 against the time of 7:26, and 7:23 3/4 against Lecomte, over the Metairie Course, New Orleans, April 2nd and April 14th, 1855. Pryor replied that this honor was only because of Lexington's own unflinching and indomitable game. By the time of Lexington's last race, Tenbrook had been tapped by the spirit as a man long and honorably associated with the advancement of the sport of racing. He was only 44. There was nothing left for Tenbrook in America, no records to break because he'd be breaking his own. He sold his interest in his beloved Metairie and chartered his trip to England to become the first American to race American horses there. But not Lexington. Instead of races at Newmarket or Goodwood, he would enter the breeding shed at John Harper's Nantura Stock Farm in Versailles, Kentucky. Ever the promotional wizard, Tenbrook dispatched telegrams trumpeting his stallion's arrival at each port and railroad platform en route to the Bluegrass State. The processional became a parade. The inspiration Lexington had provided to persons of all classes, colors, and states of health or disability was fully displayed at the shipping docks and train platforms. To the crowds turned out to see him, he was something more than a horse. He was the embodiment of perseverance, a symbol of hope. At that time, the name of Lexington was handled with scarcely less deference than that of the deity. Historian Charles Trevathan wrote, Lexington's purse earnings of $56,000, about $1,724,000 today, accumulated in just 7 races, were for that era unheard of as an aggregate for a single horse. Yet as extraordinary a winner as Lexington was, his greatest achievements lay ahead. In the racing books, his name was already immortalized, but paper isn't blood.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm extremely nervous to be up here, and I'm a former trial attorney. It's really great to be here, and the first time I ever heard of the Dr. Tony Ryan Award was in 2013 when I was at the Keeneland Library, and that's when I first read about Lexington and learned about that horse in 2012. And started making my pilgrimages, from Albuquerque, New Mexico to Keeneland Library to learn everything that I could about Lexington. And while I was there, I befriended a man who was always sitting at a table next to the copy machine, because I was always using the copy machine like all day long. And I befriended this man sitting at the table who became very interested in the research that I was doing and what exactly I was working on. And that was the late Bill Mooney. And in talking to Bill Mooney, he told me, and it was so great, because he said to me, first of all, he congratulated me for picking a somewhat obscure horse to write about. And then he proceeded to give me advice, because in his words, he knew a thing or two about writing about horses that run around in circles. And so this advice that he gave me was given essentially in the gracious form of editing. I had written a little bit about Boston, the sire of Lexington, and had given that to him, and he very generously, gave me his thoughts and his edits on that, and that's actually incorporated in the book. So the book Lexington has Bill Mooney in there. His advice that he gave to me was so very helpful, and it was something that I always fell back on, in the 10 years, this book has been in my life 10 years. In the 10 years that I worked on this book, I always, in the process of writing it, would fall back on the advice from Bill Mooney and think, okay, I need to rein it back in just a little bit, because it's too much, Kim, it's too much. But he was so very helpful to me, and I did not know him very long, unfortunately, but a great man. But I mention him because that's where I learned about the Dr. Tony Ryan Award, and he of course had won the Dr. Tony Ryan Award along with Ted Bassett for the very beautiful book that they wrote about Ted Bassett. And if you haven't read it, you should, because it's a great book. It's a narrative, it's a great book. I so very naively, this is my first book, so very naively at the time, that I learned about it, went back in my little notes and wrote Dr. Tony Ryan Award. If this book is ever published, I'm going for that. And so it is great to be here. I want to thank the late Dr. Tony Ryan and Mark Simon for coming up with this award, and for continuing it, and Mary Simon for continuing it, and Shane Ryan for continuing it over the years, because it is so nice, for authors that delve into this grand and this storied sport to be able to be recognized, in some manner. So I really do appreciate that, and for the continued effort, and to the judges who have so many years devoted a lot of time and a lot of care and a lot of judgment into picking, the semifinalists, the finalists. I can't even imagine. The one thing about Lexington, the horse, that I really hope that readers take away from it, and it was a perfect passage that you picked, because the one thing that I hope readers take away from it is perseverance. For me, that's what that horse was. It was that bottom. Bottom was the term. in the 19th century, you know, that they had for a phenomenal racehorse. Bottom was that courage, that drive, that stamina, that something, you know, that made that horse go against all odds to do what it could do. And these horses ran 4-mile heats then. I mean, this is no joke in racing. Lexington certainly was, I mean, he was bred to run. That horse was just phenomenal. But it wasn't just his ability, what he could do. It came from here, you know, and it came from here. And that's that bottom that we're talking about. It's that perseverance. It's, you know, he ran partially blind, which is just phenomenal, and accomplished what he did. And he was really like a metaphor in many ways, because it wasn't just that he persevered, but that he persevered in this time, you know, 1854, 1855, when he was running. I mean, the country, the America, was already on the brink of a civil war. It was a very tragic time and a very torn and battled time. And this horse did not race for the South. He did not race for the North. He raced for the nation. And they all gathered. And as soon as this horse won the Great State, and he was a phenomenal horse that was recognized everywhere, everyone wanted to root for this horse. And he was able to give them that hope and to give them that spirit. Of course, his owners, Richard Timbrook, and then Robert Alexander over at Whitburn Farm, which is Airdrie, also persevered, because they did not pursue the normal path that their families had set out for them. They chose much harder paths, much more difficult paths, and they had to pave that way themselves. And so it's their perseverance as well, but it's also, you know, telling us that we should reach, you know, we should aspire to reach into our dreams and to try and to make the effort and to go for it. And so, to me, that's the ultimate takeaway from Lexington. I certainly hope that's what readers take away from it. I am here tonight really as a representative of so many people that were involved in making this book happen. And I do want to thank them. My agent, Emma Pari, you know, Janklo Nesbitt, who was very instrumental in getting this book into the hands of Ballantine and Random House. I want to thank my publisher, Ballantine and Random House, who is not in the business of routinely publishing racehorse books. They published Seabiscuit, but that was 20 or 30 years ago in a much different era of horse racing. And so they took this book on in the current state of horse racing in 2023, which was a very difficult year to publish a book on horse racing. And they took it on, and they knew that, and they looked it in the eye. They knew what they were dealing with, and they did not back down. They doubled down, and they published the book. And so they deserve a tremendous amount of credit. I want to thank my editor at Ballantine Random House, Susanna Porter. And the great thing about Susanna and my agent, Emma, is that both of them encouraged me to write the book that I wanted to write. They did not change my voice. They did not change my direction or my vision of the book. And they encouraged me to tackle the very difficult subjects that are in the book. I mean, in order to write about perseverance, you have to go to the dark side, right? You have to go to the violence that was occurring at the time. You have to go to slavery. You have to go to what people had to go through. I mean, this is really a dark book in a lot of ways. It's not a you know, a whimsical book. And of course, there's gender identity issues in this book as well with Sue Mundy. And they did not shy away from that, and they encouraged me to explore those and to write about those in the book. I also want to thank Athena Lark, who's a professor at Berkeley, who did a sensitivity reading of the book for us to make sure we got it right. When I say that there are so many people involved, I'm not joking. When Susanna, my editor, emailed me on a few emails, CC to the emails were about 120 people at Random House. I'm not kidding. And so all of these people had some say on some level or something with this book. And so there's a lot of people that are really standing behind me up here tonight. And so, by making this book a finalist, you've acknowledged the hard work and the care that so many people put into this to make sure that we got the absolute best book that we could get out to the readers. So thank you so much.
All right, those were, as usual, this evening is always the highlight, is listening to all the authors talk about their books, and they all did a great job. And as I said earlier, these are book publishing is tough. People put years into this thing, and we have Kurt put like about 40 years into his, and Kim about 10 years into her. So it's tough. It's tough business, but the rewards are there at the end when all these books are published. We'll go on to before I announce the winner here. I want to thank everybody again for coming. I see we my Ed Sullivan impression here. We have even the mayor of Lexington here, Linda Gordon. So thanks again, and Shane sends his regrets. So anyways, we'll go on to the announce the winner, and the winner is Lexington by Kim Wickens. Kim, you can come up here and say a couple of words. We appreciate it.
You guys, I left my husband and son at home because I didn't think I was here. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I don't know what to
Well, thanks again, everybody, for coming, and the bar is open.